We're now ready to integrate our history export component into our base. I've put in a final planning update, and I've also generated test plans for the entire program, beginning with showing that our help works as expected, and ending by showing that export also works as expected. I made a second version of my base component, and I've got my most recent history GUI open as well. And we're going to go from top to bottom, checking that we've got all of the libraries that we need. That means I need to put in my import date library. And in my converter class, I'm going to leave my all calculations list alone. And the first thing I need to do is check that my history button is coded correctly. And as I've got such a small window, I've opened my history GUI off camera. And one of the first things you should do is set up your button so that it goes to the history function. And of course, initially that's going to be orange because it doesn't yet exist. But we can scroll down, and it's a great idea to minimize all of our functions. And after our help function, we can pop in our to history function, knowing of course that it's going to have a HYSIFIT over history export because that class doesn't yet exist in our base component. But that's thankfully a very easy fix because underneath my display help, I can copy in my entire history component, reformat the file, and then we can do some testing. So I can go ahead and follow my plan, and the help's looking good. And it's nice to have a plan because we can follow it exactly. I can go XLII, and I'm going to Fahrenheit. It gives me an error. And I've worked through all of the cases on my list. So if I push my history export, it's showing only the valid cases as expected. And if I close, the button becomes available again. And if I use the cross, the button becomes available again. So I can go to the second part of my test plan where I've got some more test cases. And those have all worked as expected. And of course, if I do just check that final invalid case, it's going to have a HYSIFIT. Once again, we can use our export, and it's working as expected. And this time round, we can export, and there are all the expected calculations in the expected order. And of course, we've shown that our labels are working as expected. And if this was an assessment, you would of course follow your test plan with evidence of testing. And final thing you'd need to do is write up your complex discussion. I actually wrote this up as I went through the process, and I'm going to show you what the slides say. Please feel free to read them, bearing in mind that when you do your assessment, your story will be completely different to mine. I have color-coded, so my planning is in green, and there's my story. And I have continued over 3 slides. Make that 4 slides. For testing, I discussed how the testing was helpful, and I also discussed my trialing quite briefly. In the next video, we're going to move on to a brand new project that's going to help you to expand your skills even further.